Okay. Ashe, Ashe. And I first and foremost want to apologize for my late start. My moderator has been absent, but that's okay because I got a live show going for you. So for those who are not here, and those who are going to join us, I say to you in the tradition of our ancestors, Hotep. And before we move forward, we're going to do a little libation to the ancestors because we cannot forget them. And they are so important to our existence and our being. Um, they guide us, and we hope they continue to do so. And I'm just getting more righty. And it's important to venerate them as much as we can, um, especially now in this current climate with the Trump stuff going down. We need our ancestors more and more as ever, as much as ever. So, first, I want to say, guys, Ashe, and Asheo. Thank you. And remember, honoring your ancestors does not take any particular religious persuasion. Honoring your ancestors is about yours, mine, and whoever, because they're all are basically working and hoping to, but not hoping, but working towards your betterment. All right. So what's today? Well, we're going to try to take off on what we stopped at. We last talked about Moorish erudition, and in terms of that, or in the context of that, not terms, context. In the context of that, we talked about tolerance and humanity, how the cultural humanity of the Moors. I want to say before I go forward, say to you that in this channel, we'll try to talk about we will not talk about, examine and discuss the intricacies, the things that are so important to the Moors that you don't hear regularly. We all know about Tariq. We all know about Gibraltar. We all know about the Moors invasion, 711. Everybody knows that the Moors went in and they took over. There were three generations or three dynasties of Moors. All right, the Umayyads, Almoravids, and Almohads. Okay, we know them. And then we know so much about some of their contributions because you can't go anywhere without seeing something on the Moors. But what don't we know? What don't we know? Well, we don't know the specifics, the cultural apparatuses is a good term or description, adjective rather. The cultural apparatuses that were put in place so that the Moors were able to demonstrate their erudition through humanity, tolerance, and eventually total dominion over the Iberian Peninsula. So before we talk about the Moors, and today's lesson is going to be a little more structured. Before we talk about the Moors, we have to say something to all of you about history. And what is history? So history is a clock that people use to tell their political time of day. History also is a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. That quote is by Dr. John Henry Clark, and something we need to know at every session. Because history, without your history, you're pretty much going to be a term I used a couple of videos ago. You're going to usually be maladaptive in some way. See, history is a part of your identity. Those who like to say, forget about history, don't worry about it. Fine. You will find maladaptive or poor behavior in all of us. But for those people who didn't dismiss their history, outright resist it, will be suffering from something that we want to talk about later is social amnesia. Not knowing your history, ignoring it, resisting it. what will result in what we see going on today in our communities with these young people, because none of them have an idea about their history except what they get now getting on the internet. Well, without your history, you can't be a whole person because your history talks about you. It's your history is you. You cannot dismiss a portion of it and think that you're going to function in society the right way, or should I say, in a acceptable behavioral way. And I don't know what's acceptable in this crazy society because it seems to be what's real is unreal, what's true is untrue. I know I mentioned a couple of videos ago that Dr. Amos Wilson talks about that in order for African Americans to be able to live in this country and to survive, they have to be crazy. You have to be insane. And he explains that, he proves that by the fact that there are no guards at the borders. There is no military in the community keeping you straight. I shouldn't say that, but now with Trump pushing, sending these troops into Washington, D.C. But they would have to have you locked down militarily, armed guards, if they really thought that you knew your history or you knew consciously how you are living in this society. To accept this society as it is, to be able to maneuver, to be able to operate, function, even get along, you have to be insane because what they have taught us and conditioned us to be is insane. So we'll go through that. But today, listen, I know some of you might have jumped in because you want to hear about the Moors today, and that's what I'm going to stay with when I get to it. But there's a couple of things we need to talk about quickly. I said this is not going to be a political station, and it's not, but we have to make note of some things that's going on. So first of all, I'd like to make an announcement. There's a gentleman by the name Quincy Lazarnus, who's a very good friend of the family. On Saturday, April 16th, he will be having, or should I say, he will be showcasing his talents and as regards to enticing students to involve in his multiverse, I wouldn't call it a classroom, but his multiverse program to attract kids of color, to offer them training, but training not in the typical traditional way, but training through the media, through social platform, but ultimately through virtual reality. And when I was a teacher and I was teaching students with disabilities, one of the things I did besides teach was I was in the streets and creating employment opportunities for these kids from places like trade unions and maintenance unions and functional work that they could do. Well, Quincy is presenting this in another way through virtual reality. So instead of maybe going into a classroom or into the site to learn, you're going to learn virtually, and then you're going to apply those skills realistically and practically. And so that's Saturday at the Apollo Theater. We should all go. I'll be there. Hopefully, I'll see you there. And starts between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the world famous Apollo Theater. So I hope all of you can go. Number 2 on the list is gerrymandering and redistricting. You guys should be really focused on what's going on politically now if you haven't been before, because it is crucial to understand what's going on. It's crucial. You don't know when Trump is coming to a city near you. Right now it's in Washington. As many of them, I'm glad it's not here. Hey, New York is another one of the cities he hates. So we don't know. So we don't know where he's going next, but we should understand what's going on with this. So I'm going to give you a general look. I taught this in school. I taught history and I taught sociology. I taught politics. I taught political science, world history, U.S. history. Well, some of my memory has, over the last 10 years, waned a bit, but I know how to get myself right. So what we should know, first of all, about redistricting. How many times have you seen census takers come to your neighborhood and you see these kids, mostly kids, trying to come, attempting to get a count on families in our communities, and the doors have been shut in their faces, or they've been chased and ran and run out of the neighborhood, or they are fearful. And I shouldn't say these people are fearful because most of them are not fearful. Census takers are brave, committed people, young or old, and they come into our communities, and in our communities, they get the worst treatment. Why? Why do they? Because we don't understand our U.S. history. Not only do you not understand your own history, but you don't understand European history. You don't understand European government. You don't understand the United States government, and we don't understand how it operates. And it's not all your fault. You see, in high school, when I taught these topics, I taught them non-politically. Yeah, this is the term I learned from Dr. Amos Wilson. Non-politically. What do I mean by that? I mean, I taught them without any attachment to the reality where the kids and our students were living. What's the political reality of living in the South Bronx? What's the political reality of living in our communities? Well, there is no political reality if you don't associate the topic that you're learning in school, let's say United States government. If you don't take the United States government and attach it to a political reality in your community, then you're not going to be able to understand these things because it's not important to you. This is done or designed just for you not to listen. So an example of political reality in your communities and why a census taker, how important they are, is the amount of funds you receive for your community. All right, it starts with the community school boards. How much are they receiving from the government to provide assistance and benefits and entitlements to you? All right. So once you understand census, how important this process is every 10 years, so that we can get a count in our communities. And by getting a count in our communities, we get power. We get power through monetary funds. If you're not partaking in the census, then you will have a problem, or collectively, getting funds and economic entitlements to your community. And this is what we have historically done. We have not paid attention, but now you got to pay attention, because what Trump is planning to do is change these districts, redraw them so that they favor his party instead of yours, which is the Democratic Party mostly. And as a result, you might wind up with another Trump term. So let's understand quickly, and I'm not going to stay too long, I'm already long. Let's understand that census takers are responsible for providing to you representatives from your district. It works like this. The largest population gets the more representatives. So a community in the Upper Bronx, I think it's District 12, is a very large community. They have a lot of people living there, so they get a couple of more representatives than, let's say, a small place like Staten Island. Okay, so population, how many people in your community, depends on what type of political power you get. When you gerrymander, what you're doing is you're drawing it for yourself. So you're drawing a map, a congressional map that shows your district, let's say Cortona Park, and you're going to draw a congressional map that's going to put everybody near Cortona Park, no matter whether they live there or not. Thereby doing that, by redrawing the districts, you eliminate a few other representatives who have been representing you for maybe the last 5 or 10 years. Who can do this? The governor of each state can redraw your district to favor Republicans or Democrats, depending on which one he goes. At this particular time in Texas, President Trump has requested that the governor there redraw the districts so he can gain 5 more seats by eliminating 5 seats. Okay, so you eliminate these seats, you gain more for yourself. You have now done what they call gerrymandering. Now, of course, we know what electoral votes are. If we don't, every state has a group of electors. California has the most. They have 54, if I remember, maybe more. To counter President Trump's request to redraw the districts in Texas, Governor Newsom in California is going to redraw his districts, which will knock out more Republicans than the Texas redistricting would knock out Democrats, thereby balancing the playing field when the elections come up or when the midterms come up in 2026. That's what's important, the midterms, because with the midterms, we eliminate some of these MAGA madmen and madwomen out of Congress and get us in there, or Democrats, or someone favorable to Democrats, and then thereby beginning the process of removing the president from many of the things that he's done. Okay, illegal, violation of the Constitution, violation of any criminal act. The involvement in the Epstein files is just incredible. So this president has done everything he can to make sure that he gains power at all costs. Redistricting is the way. So I'm going to stop right there. Those who don't know, need to go into AI. They give you all this now in AI. Yeah, I had to dredge this stuff up and teach it to my students for years, but you can get this through AI now. Gerrymandering, redistricting, census takers. Those are the three key terms. Look them up. If I get a deluge of requests and someone says, Mr. Hicks, we want you to talk, I'll go back into my books like I'm teaching class again. That's what I do because I love all you guys out there. And this is, again, I always will say, this is for our white brothers and sisters as well as our black brothers and sisters, because all of you are going to be affected. For those who are white and voted for Trump and think that, oh, I did the right, you've already seen the MAGA millions turn against this man because of the Epstein files. They've seen the light. We need to continue to push that effort, okay? Because he doesn't have anything good for any of us, white or black. Okay, let's move on. So I got the redistricting ban. We talked about the Apollo multiverse presentation by our good family friend, Quincy Lozanis. Please attend. Okay, and today we want to get to the gist of the lesson, all right? We're always on the Moors, and as I said, we'll be spending a lot of time on the Moors. It's a very popular topic across the media platforms and social media, and I think it's important that we continue to move in that direction. But before you could talk about the Moors, you must be able to talk about the geography. When you teach history, or when you even discuss history, before we can start talking about all the events that occurred, you have to understand the geography. Even last week, when I began to report on this, or to discuss this, I should say, ass backwards. Okay? And what do I mean by that? I started discussing some of the social and educational realities of Al-Andalus, which was Moorish Spain. And I talked about how these realities, comparatively, I got into a little comparative analysis, compared one with the other. And we talked about the humanity of the Moors and how one of the things Black folks have unique as part of their worldview is humanity. And we talked about that humanity as an element of, yes, we'll continue with tolerance. Okay. I was going to try to switch that up, but we're going to stay with tolerance. The Moors were a very, very tolerant invasion. Sounds it doesn't make sense, right? A tolerant invasion. Yes, a tolerant invasion. That's what we do. So when the Moors went into Iberia and they dominated for 800 years, one of the things they were with the people, the Christians, the Christian Catholics, the peasants, the general public adored and loved about the Moors was their tolerance. So we're going to come back to that, but first we don't want to put that but before the front. So we're going to think what's first, and that's geography. So let's see if we can get into this geography of the Moors. Why is it important? Well, it's important because you can't understand Al-Andalus, Cordoba, Seville, or Toledo unless you know where they were. I could be talking about some places in space, but I'm not. I'm talking about places that actually existed. So Spain at this time is the Iberian Peninsula. And in the peninsula, you have a large population in Spain who are basically Christian and Catholic. This population is a leftover from the Visigoths and Vandals. The Visigoths and the Vandals were the people who the Moors controlled for the next 800 years. So what do we know about this population, this culture? What? Culture was not something that we have a lot to talk about these people, 7-Eleven in Iberia. For example, we know that their culture was Catholic and Christian. We also know that they were former Roman subjects. Before the Moors entered Spain or dominated Spain, Spain or Iberia was controlled by the Roman Empire. And I should say the Eastern Roman Empire, but at this time there are two Roman empires. Now, this Roman Empire could no longer control the Visigoths and Vandals. The Visigoths and Vandals actually destroyed the Roman Empire, but they didn't replace it with anything better. They pretty much, or should I say, the hierarchy pretty much maintained everything that the Romans were doing and even worse, because now they entered their religious values and beliefs and they applied them or pressed them onto the people. And I say oppress, yes, because when you read and find out what they did, you understand that this is a form of oppression. So the Iberian population of culture was Christian. They were former Roman subjects. Their names were the Vandals and the Visigoths. They were brutish, uncouth people. I'll tell you, some of this history is going to be shocking. They were brutish, uncouth, and oppressed people. And who were they being oppressed by? The Catholic Church. The Catholic Church. So here's what we need to know geographically about these people, these Visigoths and Vandals. Where is it located? How many people, when you get on your next session looking at the Moors, and you can create a dialogue, I want you to ask those persons, where is it located both absolutely and relatively? See, you wanted to learn about history. You can't, history is not a 8-minute, 3-minute lesson. It's long, arduous, and it takes some thinking. So let's go to the term. Absolute location. Absolute location is simply exactly where a place is. So we know the South Bronx is south in the southern part of the Bronx. All right, you have a North Bronx and an East Bronx. So absolutely where it is, the absolute location. Now, if we were using longitude and latitude, we would get the exact location. That's what I taught in class, but we're not going to do that today. So then we have absolute location, which tells you exactly where a place is. Then we have relative location. What is that? Relative location is the location of a place in relation to another place. So Cordoba and Iberia was south of Toledo, meaning it was under Toledo. So if you would ask me where was Cordoba, I would say Cordoba is south of Toledo. So you would be able to go to the map, find Toledo, look down, and you would see Cordoba. So, in order for you to begin to understand history the real way, if you're truly interested in history, you have to know the geography of the place you're talking about. So, Spain or Iberia is west of France, um, south of let me bring up. I'm gonna have to return my map. It is west of France. So let's leave it at that without me getting too complicated. All right, it's west of France. These things are important so you'll know logic geographically where you need to go. So after today, you need to go get your map, locate these places: Toledo, Cordova, Valencia, um, Granada. You need to locate these places on a map, circle them so you'll know where they are. You need to get an ancient map, by the way. Go to AI, get an ancient map of Iberia. Circle these places, go, these are the key places. I'll go over them one more time: Gibraltar, Toledo, Cordoba, Granada. And then you'll have, of course, northern Spain, which where the Castilians and Leons are. That's another one. I don't want to confuse, so stay with that. What are its human and physical characteristics? What were the people like? What were their beliefs? What were their conditions that they lived in? And I'm going to answer all those questions very poorly. When the Moors entered Spain, one of the first things they had to do, and when they dominated, was teach the Iberian population how to use and respect hygiene. Yes, hygiene. During this time in Europe, many families kept their animals inside their homes. Many people in this community, in this population, did not regard the emptying of their feces in the same area where they would drink the water. They did not regard that as unhealthy. Alcohol was introduced to the Iberian Peninsula, probably Europe, through the Moors. And one of the first things the Moors did, not just build mosques, was build bathhouses. They built madrasas. They built barmistans, which are hospitals in Arabic. They built these things because the first thing they knew they had to do was clean the place up so that they could live there. Because at this time, Europeans in Spain and most of Europe were living in a very oppressive state. And we'll get into more details as we see fit. What is the human and physical characteristic? We know the physical characteristic, the human character. What is the physical? A lot of rivers. Spain and Portugal have a lot of rivers that traverse through its countryside. That was very important for dominating its peninsula. Rivers, yes, and we're going to talk about what those rivers were and where they are because they're important to how the Moors were able to dominate the Iberian Peninsula or Spain. How did the people get there? Migration is a part of geography. Where did these Visigoths and Vandals come from? How did they migrate? Why did they migrate? These are not the original people of Spain. Actually, you should know that Africans were in Spain in 700 BC. Yes. Taharqa. Check it out. Taharqa was in Spain. Yes, he was. 25th dynasty. Check it out. But we're not going there yet either. So we talk about the physical human. How does this people move? We talk about the migration of the Vandals and the Visigoths. Why did they migrate there? How can we compare and contrast Iberia to similar places at this time? If Spain was in this condition, what was the Songhai Empire like? What was Mali like? What was going on in Africa? If Europe was in a medieval period or sometimes dark ages, how can we compare that to the other civilizations that were functioning at the time. We'll get to that too. How did the people in Iberia, how did they interact with their environment? Very poorly. One of the things the Moors had to do was invent or introduce irrigation systems so that water could run freely, hygiene could be kept in place, bathhouses created. Even Moors even had water coming out of cold and hot faucets. That's how deep their irrigation systems, how should I say deep? That's no pun intended, but how important they were to the Iberian Peninsula. And then I want you to contemplate this for our next class. What is the difference between a physical map and a political map? I'm going to tell you that. We ain't going to wait. What's the difference? All right, so let's get to these questions. So, number one, things to know about the Iberian Peninsula. I'm just going over what we just did. So, what is the absolute and relative location? Western Hemisphere would be an absolute location, and more absolute would be the logistics of where it's located. Okay, the peninsula, the key mountains, the rivers, which separated populations from other populations. What are these rivers? How were these rivers important? Where did they migrate from? We talked about the migration. Well, they migrated from Central Asia. All right, these Visigoths and Vandals migrated from Central Asia. We get more to that. That can get deeper. We're going to go into that later. Remember, this is very slow. What was Mali, Shanghai, and Sahel? What were they like as compared to Spain at this point? Again, these are things you can look up on your own. Mali, Shanghai, these empires were flourishing at this time. And we mentioned about the environment. How did they interact with their environment? Well, we know they did not interact with their environment very well. The Moors came and showed them how to do that. They were poor agriculturalists. And finally, what is the difference between the physical and political map? Well, one map, a physical map, shows the physical borders and boundaries and rivers and mountains, where a political map only shows you the boundaries. So what's the boundary between Bronx and Brooklyn? You might want to use a Cross Bronx Expressway, but where is the physical boundary? Where it's a bridge that we cross, yes. And after you cross that bridge, you are now in the Bronx. And that is just a political boundary, meaning it can shift. And depending on if you get a governor who decides to say, well, you know what? Above High Bridge is the Bronx, below High Bridge is Manhattan. They can do that. That's a political map. Those maps are drawn up in Congress or in some state house. But a physical map is you going there plotting what is where. All right. So this is the question you need to contemplate for the next class. When we go back into the next class, I'm going to dig into this a little more deeper. And here's a summary question. How did the geographic factors, how did those factors that we just described influence the Moorish invasion? How did those geographical factors influence the Moorish invasion? Now, one factor I didn't mention, which is important, but you probably know already because everywhere I go, is Gibraltar Straits. The Gibraltar Straits lies between Africa and Spain. That body of water, I believe it's only 17 miles, is key to understanding the Moors. So while you're doing all this other work or erudition, other work, please look into that. There we go. All right, let's go. We talked about that. Where are we going now? All right. Let's talk about now. We're going to take the social realities that we started with last week. We're going to bring that into our discussion today, the social reality. First of all, Moorish history is the missing pages of world history. Yes, it is. All African history are the missing pages of world history. African history is a pure history. Why? Because Africans were the first persons on the planet. Every people in the world, everyone comes from us. Now, we have a lot of deniers, but that is the truth. And very unconsciously, most people know it. I was watching a video recently in China where they were showing the black family. Because, see, in most, particularly Asian countries, the African population that was the original population has been pushed to the bottom in the most undesirable geographical locations in their countries. It's like the Tamil in India. The first Africans are treated so poorly. They are pushed to the most undesirable position areas in India. The same for is China. The same for is Indonesia, where you have these black populations. You never see them on TV because when the media, the propagandized media, starts covering these people, no matter whether it's just a documentation or some beautiful show they want to show how beautiful it is, they never show you the black people. They always show you the Indian looking, the dark skin, but we all know if you're smart, that you can't get that dark skin unless you interacted with something that was dark. Because two whites don't make a black, but two blacks can make a white. So many of these people are in denial. This is why we have so much consternation in the world. Like Dr. Amos Wilson says, you can't deny your history because it is you. And when you do that, you develop maladaptive behaviors. Yes. I recently saw an athlete who just signed a contract and married a girl, don't remember his name offhand. Doesn't make a difference. Do what they always do. Billions, zillions of dollars, goes and marries some European woman. Nothing against that. We want. I'm not. I think we need to marry not because of any racial superiority, but we need to marry with our own because we are so horrible. We are doing so bad. We need to adopt black kids, Hispanic kids. We need to marry someone who knows your culture. But he marries someone out. Sure enough, half a year later, she's suing him and taking billions of his dollars, taking all his money. Because in his mind, marrying white was acculturating to the norm, being accepted, being part of the crowd. What happened? What happened? I'm not saying if he had married a sister that wouldn't have happened. But at least the money that she's going to get goes back into the neighborhood. No, yes, because some of our European sisters are not going to do that. They're not going to take that money they went from these black athletes and put it back in the community. But look at him now. He's barely 21. She's suing him for everything. He had no stipulation so that God forbid this happens because there was no one there to guide him. Because when they got his money, he does what all athletes do. I'm going to buy my mama a house. I'm going to give everybody my money away. I'm going to give my friends. Yeah. This is the problem with us. We are the biggest self-gratifiers. We just got to gratify ourselves. So the poor kid is getting taken to the bank. And these lessons are important. Hopefully, there's someone on the other side showing them, this is what you need to do with your money. Invest in your community. Invest in your community. All right. So let's talk about the value of your history again. Until recently, and with the advent of the prevalence of the internet, Moorish history was practically unknown to many a layman. My teaching experience did not include Moorish history, though it did include the Renaissance. Oh, wow. Moors and Renaissance. Hope I can come back to that. All right, it did teach the Renaissance. It did teach Spanish. It did teach medieval history, all of those history, but never Moorish history. Not a mention of how these great scientists during the Renaissance, these science, because that's when Moorish science bombarded the peninsula. Not one mentioned how all of these great scientists able to get that information. How did the Renaissance begin? Did they just come from nowhere? Just flourish? How did Western civilization get its values, its scientific and social? How did that just happen? And why did it happen in Spain first, before England and the other countries, France? Why did this birth and this flourishing of knowledge, and why did it happen in Spain and Portugal first? Why did the era of exploration, the discovery, why was it the Spanish and the Portuguese first? Yes, the answer is the Moors. Of course, we'll get to that too. All right. The other thing you need to go before we got through geography. Now we're talking about Moorish history and how it goes. I'm going to get back into the comparative analysis between the Christians and the Moors. That's coming. We're going to end with that. But with the recent advent of the internet, just like in Europe, his name escapes me. Gutenheim, I think it was Gutenheim. He invented the printing press in Europe, in the 15th century. And when he did that, Europe began to read. Knowledge began to flow, and the Catholic Church tried to stop that too. Well, that's what the internet is to us. It's our Gutenberg's machine. I hope I'm not destroying this person's name, and I'll have to go back if I made a mistake. Please forgive me. So let's go quickly to the term Moor. So I said this earlier in one of my other, if you were a Moor, you were black. Though there were some white Moors and Arab Moors, sure. But when we talk about Moors, since the Roman times, who started that name more or less, Moors are African people. I don't want to spend my time talking about that no more. It's like talking about who were the first people in the world. Not doing it. I've said this before. But you got to understand that these terms, Berber, Moor, Arab, Jews. When you're talking about the Jews in this period, you're talking about black Jews. When you're talking about Arabs during this period, you're talking about the black. And I'm sorry, Moors, you're talking about the black people. But because they were Arab people from Arabia. They were running things, by the way. They were in charge because they invaded Egypt. And the invasion of Egypt continued right across the Sahel, Libya, Morocco, Algeria, and all these places. Right? So they were the first invaders. They were invading Egypt. Why? Like the same reason France invaded Egypt. Same reason the United States. Same reason, because that's where all the erudition is. That's where the knowledge was. France kicked out England, right? Remember Napoleon in Egypt blowing up the nose? Yeah. He brought all the scientists and all the great people of knowledge there, stole all the information, just like the Greeks, just like the Arabs, just like the, who else did I leave out? The Persians. Everybody targeted Egypt because in Egypt was all the knowledge. The Greeks, the Persians, they all started their religions were cultivated in Alexandria. Yes, Christianity. Its first home was Africa. But the term Moor can get confused. When you hear Berber, Moor, Hebrew, in this term, we're talking about black people. So I want to get that out of the way. It's a distortion of ethnicity, a distortion of ethnicity that is part of the confusing and the confusion we find in history. And this is also designed to keep you confused. All right. I think we're just about done with that. And we're going How long have I been going now? Ooh, 40. This is the longest I've gone. And I got some more to go. All right, let's have some fun here. So we're going to end with this. We're going to do some comparing and contrasting with social realities. Now remember, we're with Dr. Pimento Bay. I actually tried to copy some of this stuff, and we're at Pimento Bay. We're going to talk about just some tolerance real quick, and hopefully I can read this well to you. And we're going to end with this. Bracci, which is another European historian. Yes, I'm back to our golden age of the Moors. A lot of European historians are quoted in this. Please get your book. This book, if Hitler was alive, he'd ban this book. It might be getting banned soon. Keep messing with Trump. All right. Bracci maintains that Arab imperialism, and it wasn't just American imperialism. Arabs were imperialists too. Africans were too. Egypt was a theocracy, but it was an imperialistic theocracy. Was not based upon racial supremacy. It entered by force, meaning Arab imperialism, entered by force and impressed its culture because it appreciated what it found and did not fear the ideas that would become diluted by blood ties. See, this is where we have to talk about European history. Because Europeans always set themselves apart from other people. And this is why. Because they did not want to have intermixing of their blood. This served a benefit for them, but it also served as a detriment. Tolerance, continue reading from Dr. Jose Pimento Bay's essay. Tolerance was very much the creed of Moorish Spain. Conversion to Islam was not forced. Few Jews converted to Islam as they enjoyed freedom of worship and the right to live by their own customs. The chief rabbi had complete jurisdiction over the Jewish community. As a result, the Jews prospered in various trades, and they were particularly active in the slave trade. It wasn't until the coming of the Almoravids. Now, the Almoravids were the second dynasty in Spain. It wasn't until the coming of the Almoravids in the 11th century that the Jews endured any type of persecution. And that could be, Dr. Bay goes on to say, because the Umayyad dynasty Jews were heavily involved in the slave trade. When the Almoravids entered Spain, taking over from the Umayyads, they were strict religious type. Let me get a better word. They were highly religious, very religious. They believed in a type of Islam that was pure. So when they entered into the Iberian Peninsula, they might have been very confused as to why Jews were trading Africans. And they might have been persecuted themselves because of that. And that's suggested by Dr. Bay. Let's go on. He goes on to say, one could wonder if the Jewish persecution under the Almoravids had something to do with the considerable Jewish involvement in the slave trade. Still, the Jewish presence in Andalus is exemplified by uninterrupted prosperity for more than 700 years or so until the Moorish control vanished. We might also note that it was only a generation after Almoravids, with Andalus now under African Almohad control, that perhaps the greatest Jewish philosopher, Moses ben Maimonides, rose to great prominence. So their society, excuse me a second, please. Their society was so tolerant that they were able to create philosophers. The constant warfare between I want to add something to the Jewish slavery part, that this is not a blame game or who had slavery, who perfected it and who didn't. But it's important to understand that the slavery that the Jewish population was involved in, so were Africans. Yes, enslaving and selling their own people, and so were whites. Matter of fact, at this time in European history, there were more white slaves being sold and traded between Europe and Africa than there were African slaves. Let me go on. O'Callaghan, another historian, European historian, said Negroes from Sudan and European slaves filled the ranks of servitude in Moorish Spain. But he points out very quickly, however, that Islam's brand of slavery cannot be compared with the more dehumanizing kind practiced by the Christian Europeans. In reference to Islamic slave, Callahan writes, listen to this, owners did not possess the power of life and death over their slaves, nor could they inflict excessive punishment. Slave had rights. Yes. Islamic slavery, slaves had rights. They could actually seek official assistance from the government. Let me say that again. Slave had rights. They could actually seek assistance if they were exceedingly maltreated. Any student of American history knows that this was far from the case regarding the British and the U.S. system of enslavement. The enslaved African was a non-human, legally designated as property. Whoever it was that said all human slavery has been precisely the same is wrong and is simply speaking from a position of extreme historical and cultural ignorance. Islamic slave, listen, I'm not trying to say any one's better than the other, but we have to be practical here. That the Islamic slave trade as compared to British and US was like living in luxury. African people who lived in the Americas had no rights. They were chattel. Chattel. So there is a difference. There is a comparative that could be made that shows a big difference. All right. I'm trying to bring this to an end now. The enslaved African in America was non-human, legally designated as property. Whoever it was that said that all slavery was the same, and I already went through this, was speaking out of pure ignorance. I feel that I must, and this is O'Callaghan speaking, I feel that I must take a moment to comment upon the significance of the use of the word Negroes. Negroes. Who's a Negro? Who is a Negro? I know one thing. A Negro is a person with no land, no history, and no self. But let's see what Callahan says about the use of the word Negroes. When speaking of those slaves who were imported from Sudan, so he's saying that Europeans had made a difference of Negroes and Black people and African. Let me say that again. Yes, European, particularly historians, have made a difference between Negroes, African, Blacks, and even Berbers. But let's stick with Negroes. This is what I'm going to actually close with that. Let me just close with this one thing. We're going to get back on the word Negro. I feel that I must take a moment to comment on the significance of O'Callaghan's use of the word Negroes. This is Dr. Bay commenting on the historian O'Callaghan, who used the term Negroes when speaking of those slaves who were imported from the Sudan. So the slaves who were imported from deep Africa, he called Negroes, but the Black Africans, he's calling Moors. Now remember what I told you earlier about these terms and how they used to confuse us. Who is a Negro? What is a Negro? Oh, Dr. Bay goes on to say, why does he not simply refer to them as Sudanese? After all, he's very careful about giving nationality of all the European slaves, remember Slavs, Franks, and so forth. But he called the Sudanese Negroes. Whether Mr. O'Callahan's statement was intentional or merely a conditional response, it only feeds the process of historically denying phenotypically black-skinned Africans of a national origin. This is why historians, some of the greatest ones, separate us with these terms: Negro, African, Black, Berber, Negro, the worst of all. What is a Negro? By the way, I've never seen Negro Land, have you? What is Negro Land? I'm sure some white folks probably created a map somewhere they call, but where is Negro Land? Why? What does it do by calling a person a Negro? Well, the first thing it does, folks, if you haven't felt it, because I can feel it, is it separates us and alienates us. It's a term that has no meaning. It's a term that does not relate to a people, a land, or a culture. It's a term designed specifically to dominate and control people. Yes. There is no historical reference to Negroes. I don't know what a Negro is. I don't want to know what a Negro is. But it is a horrible term to use. Let me close with this. It disturbs me so much when I hear that term, Negro. I'm just going to end, as I said, with some comparative analysis between Christian and Moorish Spain. But before we do that, I just want to go over my notes, make sure I didn't leave anything out for today. Negro. I can't get rid of it. Who is a Negro? I wish somebody would point one out to me, because I've never seen a Negro before in my life. Okay. All right. So let's go here. Let's end with this. Let's end with a comparative analysis. Going on 57 minutes an hour. So I'm going to get this on right before the hour. Woo-hoo. I'm going to take down all the other videos, guys, and keep this up. So just beware. So Christian versus Moorish, the social realities of Moorish Spain. Christians' slavery versus Moorish slavery. We already talked about that. No rights and chattel. Moorish slaves or Islamic had rights. Christian slavery had power over life and death. Moorish slavery even allowed social mobility. Yes, you can move up in society as a Moorish slave. I just wanted to say, not only did the Christians have power over your life, but they had power over your life and death. I didn't mention that's a life, that's a death. Moorish slaves could not be subject to excessive punishment, but African slaves under Christianity were considered non-human. Chattel. You could be prosecuted. Yes, in Islamic slavery, you could prosecute. Moors allowed you to prosecute their own folks if they felt you were doing something that was humanely wrong. And finally, I'm going to say you had the protections of the government under Moorish Spain. So now you can get an idea why, when the Moors came into Spain, they were able to take it over pretty easily. And one of the reasons why was the present culture of Spain, which was non-existent. The present condition, the conditions of Moorish Spain, the oppression that the people were under, and the Catholic Church, its own oppressive arm. This is why the Moors were almost invited into Spain. Yes. And many of our Jewish brothers and sisters let them in and helped them get there. But that's for another lesson. I'm going to wrap it up today. I'll wrap it up. Well, we already wrapped it up. I'm going to say Ashe to you. I'll be back on today a little later. I'm going to throw a little quip in here and a couple of times today. So stay tuned. Hopefully you'll get back. And Ashe.